about sounds, so emphasize the use of cognates for reading. When we read, we also have to provide monitored oral reading. This, with very young learners, sounds, so they can become familiar with sounds, but with more advanced students, how to pronounce words. Sometimes the word looks totally alien because there's no correspondence between the way it is written and its pronunciation. In many ways, that can be as threatening as the printed version itself. Now, the last strategy that we can use to bridge word decoding, word recognition, and comprehension might look more difficult, challenging to achieve, especially if we consider that we're always struggling in large classes with limited resources. But we can use internet, and in fact, sites such as Gutenberg Project, they provide absolutely marvelous material, a wide range of options for various levels of difficulty in writing. You get your typical fables, your longer novels, or simply sometimes, an extract from a newspaper. And that can provide you from the different types of texts that students can read outside maybe the lesson or within the lesson, but as something more complementary. Don't forget that behind all this, we are aiming at forming independent, autonomous, but highly motivated, engaged readers. Difficult task, I know, but not impossible. Once we have started bridging the transition between word and comprehension, we can start focusing on the words. At word level, for example, not exclusively, but more than anything for younger learners, we can have, for example, picture clues. Nothing new, you've used them, but it's good to know that they make sense and that they are necessary within this new view of reading comprehension. We had already mentioned this, and at the beginning of the talk, we said that within the new view of reading, the simple view of reading, high quality phonics is absolutely essential. So now you see why. Word chunks. We are used to approaching chunks when we want to teach vocabulary, but word chunks also, especially maybe when they are becoming familiar with certain affixes rules, very simple ones, but then they can approach those as chunks. Again, it will never be emphasized enough, the importance of the prior knowledge, and within that knowledge we also have words, not only concepts, topics, experiences, but words are part of the knowledge. And allow me to emphasize once again that when we are teaching to read, we are teaching them to construct meaning, to decode no other than the world. If I'm thinking particularly of younger learners, that is to say, according to our map, progress maps, initial and probably levels 3 and 4 maybe our text is not more than a sentence or a couple of sentences. In that case, it's a good strategy as a word attack to reread the sentence again. If done without any underlying principle or aim behind, it doesn't make any sense. We don't want our students to become parrots. That's not what we are promoting. But within this context, rereading the sentence to become aware of both the sound and the meaning makes a lot of sense. And again, keep reading until it makes sense. Teacher's discretion is crucial. We all know how many rereadings are sensible. Use prior knowledge, explicitly and related, of course, to connect to a word you already know. If we go to a further stage, if we start moving from your maps, say, level 4 upwards, we will assume that the word level is already mastered, the decoding of words, the recognition of words. And as I think I've already said, don't forget that that first component of the reading process is not permanent in time. But if in the mother tongue it takes a couple of years, well, there would be an equivalent in the foreign language in the first 2 or 3 stages. But then when we focus on the comprehending, the reading comprehension, that is ongoing, it never stops, and it continues all the way. So we're looking at a text where we have more than a couple of sentences, or where we have one paragraph, but where words, unknown words, are likely to appear. Let me remind you that this is one of the sources of frustration for both students and teachers when teaching and trying to learn how to read, not only in foreign languages, but in our mother tongue as well. Obvious as it may sound, I would try and make students aware of the fact that many times they don't really know the word. I know you told your students, I know you know it, but let's remind ourselves once again. Sometimes they get stuck in one particular unit, in one particular word, and it is not necessary. Again, there are specific strategies that can help us distinguish those words which are going to be important for the meaning. Hence, the absolute relevance of the pre-stage when you plan your reading teaching. In the pre-stage, besides motivating, you're going to introduce the key words which are going to be absolutely necessary, essential to make sense of the meaning. Ideally, once students get used to that, they are going to become used to identifying those key words themselves. So once you're convinced that you do need that word to make sense of the text, we can use the context clues. We have all been told that it's good to look at the surrounding words, but it won't hurt to remind our students that that is a valid strategy. We mentioned chunks, well, knowledge, previous knowledge of word parts also. Parts of speech, is it a noun, an adjective? Maybe I don't know what it means, but I do know that it's giving me information of a certain action, then it's an adverb. Punctuation, this is something which is seldom used as an explicit reading strategy. And we forget that something as simple as a colon in a sentence, 99% of the cases is telling us that a definition will follow. What happens if I see a comma, a capital letter, dashes, and so on? With the cognates and the word sound, you see how a component which is part of the first area in the reading process, that is to say the decoding words, it's still very relevant and necessary in a more advanced word attack strategy. Word order, this is when the grammar makes sense, not teaching syntax for the sake of it, but this is when it does make sense to revise word order, that adjectives happen at a certain place, that it's not at random that we put pronouns. And last, and I suppose not necessarily least, checking with the dictionary, which in turn poses some dilemmas and some conflicts. To begin with, we need to have the resources. And the other thing is that once we have them, we need to teach them how to use them. It is amazing how many learners and adults don't really know how to use a dictionary, monolingual, bilingual. So that's something which would require a more specific training, and which could be a very attractive project with English across the curriculum with the lenguaje section in your institution. A word of advice. Many teachers wonder how much they have to help students, especially when it comes to providing vocabulary. We all know that sometimes we are confused with walking dictionaries. Miss, how do you say this? Miss, how do you say the other? I like to suggest the system of vouchers that they can ask if they